Hello, welcome to the Loney Show. I'm your host, John Maloney, and in this episode, I've brought on Asparagus and Risk 11, who will join us eventually, but if not, so what? What's the point? But anyway, as for our guest, he's from Sacramento, California. He speaks and he writes, and that's about it. But could be more, because, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Brian Johnston.
Hey, well, thank you, Johnny. Yeah, I do actually do other things than speak and write. I walk and chew gum too, but I actually write on bioethics issues. I'm a former commissioner on aging for the state of California. I'm an advocate for the medically vulnerable, served on the board of examiners of nursing homes. And what I'm going to talk about is very applicable, not just to California and the United States, but to the whole world. And it's very relevant to the UK in particular. And that's the issue that many people have failed to examine in depth, and yet it's happening all around us. That is a dramatic change to medical ethics. Historically, medicine in Western civilization was guided by the Hippocratic Oath. And in the Hippocratic Oath, a doctor who in many ways is kind of the smartest guy in the room, but they might say a pinnacle, and there's actually a philosophy that says the doctor is the pinnacle of society. But the doctor has to swear they would use their knowledge only for good, that they would never use their knowledge of the human person to harm a patient in their care, much less kill them. So the Hippocratic Oath has been a guideline for Western civilization for a long time. In the United States, there was a sweeping decision, and many people don't fully comprehend legalized abortion throughout the U.S. But what they did.
Oh dear. Oh dear. I think your audio just got cut off. I'm not sure you can hear me, but I certainly can't hear you now. So, oh boy.
Hey, mate. I don't know what happened.
What? Oh my gosh. You're back.
You there?
Yes, I can hear you. I don't know what happened. You were talking, and then all of a sudden, silence.
Bam.
Silence.
Okay.
Oh my. Sorry, can you repeat literally everything? Because I
Okay.
have no idea what you just said.
Yeah, I will take it up from the introduction. Yeah, Jamie, good to be on with you. And yes, I do write and I do talk, but I do other things too. I can walk and chew gum. But what I focus on, I'm writing, and I have written a book that's available in the UK on Amazon.uk. It's about bioethics. It's something that people haven't looked into a whole lot, and yet bioethics, and specifically medical ethics, has changed dramatically in the last few years. And specifically in the United States, it was a Supreme Court decision that altered the role of doctors. But this same issue is a worldwide issue. And in the UK, it's particularly important. And that has to do with the use of medicine to intentionally kill a patient. You see, for almost 3,000 years, doctors have sworn they would use their knowledge to only care for and never harm a patient in their care. This oath, the Hippocratic Oath, was a guideline for good medical ethics, and much has been written about it, but not too much on how did this change come about. In the United States, there was a sweeping Supreme Court decision which impacted the laws of all 50 states. In 1973, it was the famous abortion decision, Roe v. Wade. But very few people know, and it's commonly accessible, but no one digs in. There was actually two conjoined decisions, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton. And in Doe versus Bolton, Justice Blackmun was actually rather explicit. He only wanted doctors doing abortions. The radical feminists wanted to do their own abortions. And he said, that's not on. That's going to get messy. We can't have that. So only doctors are to do abortions in all 50 states. Every state had laws regulating abortions. They were all overturned. The problem was, in doing that, he was also overturning this element known as the Hippocratic Oath, because in the oath it says, I will give no deadly medicine, even if asked, and in like manner, I will not perform abortions. And the reason is that we know this biologically, and it's not new knowledge, that that's a human baby. That baby is a vulnerable human being. Yes, young and vulnerable. But if it was a canine abortion, you'd be killing young puppies. If it was an equine abortion, you'd be killing little ponies. And the fact is that in order for it to be an abortion, a life must be ended. If a life isn't ended, you don't even call it an abortion. You could call it contraception, you call it whatever you want. But by medical and objective fact, it is ending a life. As unpleasant as that may sound, we have to talk about it because it is the Hippocratic Oath that has protected life when you're in the hands of a doctor. So these decisions are quite significant, grossly misunderstood because the role of the doctor isn't fully appreciated. So the name of the book is Evil Twins, Roe and Doe, How the Supreme Court Unleashed Medical Killing. Now, some people say, "Oh, I don't want to listen to that. I don't believe that." But it isn't because I'm saying it. Some of the most radical pro-choice judges in the US agree with me. And not only Lawrence Tribe, you may not know his name, but I know many people in the UK may be familiar with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is probably the definitive radical feminist. People know. But I'm going to play for you a statement she made in 2013 about the real significance of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton because they're partnered decisions. And what they do is they change, first and foremost, medical ethics so that the physician is free to do abortions whenever they want. It did not give women the right to get an abortion or to do an abortion. She could only ask permission and access from the real decision maker, the doctor. It gives doctors the right to kill. And this is what she said.
Another feature of Roe is Roe really isn't about the woman's choice, is it? It's about the doctor's freedom to practice his profession as he thinks best. It wasn't woman centered, it was physician centered.
So this is
Another
sorry, that's a repeat of that. We don't want to repeat it. But a lot of people know that, hey, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if there's anybody that knows and understands abortion law, it's going to be her. But the fact is, the reason abortion is legalized is because doctors were given permission to do whatever they wanted to do. And that had great significance. That still echoes throughout the world. And specifically, if doctors can do whatever they want, that means something for us right now. Because, Johnny, you're hale and hearty. I can tell by listening to your voice. And
Yeah.
I'm a pretty healthy guy too. But there's times when we're not. And that's when we're most vulnerable, particularly when you go to the doctor. In our culture, historically, there's an old phrase. You go to the doctor and they say, well, okay, take off all your clothes and wait for him in the back room. And you go to the doctor and you have to trust that person. And that doctor patient relationship really is sacrosanct. But if there is no longer any ethical guideline that restrains the doctor from just, speeding things up, getting things over with. And once it becomes commonplace for doctors to basically, doctors are very overworked. In our culture, doctors are some of the busiest people, the most put upon. And so they can get tired and overwhelmed. And many times, if you, with Sherlock Holmes, you know that, of course, Conan Doyle was himself a physician. He studied at Edinburgh, one of the preeminent medical schools in the world, not just the UK. And he wrote his stories and specifically wrote about Hippocratic Oath. And in several of his stories, he actually had the bad guy, the mystery murderer, was a physician. And in one story, and it's the Speckled Band, he says, well, it's Dr. Roylott. He's the one that did this. And typically, I love Holmes, particularly. I like Cumberbatch's Holmes, but in the old Holmes, it's almost humorous because Watson says, no, Holmes, he's one of us. He's one of the profession. And of course, what you hear in Watson is that sense that no, doctors would never harm anybody. They're a doctor. But then, in the voice of Holmes, the actual trained physician who is the author, he actually says, you don't understand. Once a physician leaves the high road of his profession, he is the first among criminals because he has knowledge and he has access. And what you have is that temptation to kill. A doctor can hide their killing. In fact, I'll tell you, the number one repeat killer, that serial killer in world history that's documented is from Hull, England. And he was a physician gerontologist who would go around visiting. Most of his patients were elderly women. And you'll have to go back. I don't have it right in front of me. I do cite it in the book, but from Hull, England. And he would visit these elderly ladies, apparently had a great bedside style. They all loved him. The way he got caught was years later, they went back to, there were some suspicious deaths, but in point of fact, is he made himself an heir on several of their wills. And so initially they thought it was just 22 people, but they went through all the records and they believed that he killed in excess of 70 individuals, one at a time, in the comfort of your own home. So the problem with medical ethics is that we've had a culture built on ethical medicine, but that's now been removed. So in the UK, you may have heard some of the debates on this. There's an issue in the UK, and I know the National Health Service was rather embarrassed by it, but it's what's known as the Liverpool Protocol. Have you heard that? Sometimes it's called the
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, the Liverpool pathway. And what they're talking about is the pathway to death. And that's when you're in a nursing home and they say, well, you know, we need beds. And this one's far enough along. You know, they're incurable. I think in my original introduction, I think got clipped. But I've worked with the elderly and as a an advocate for the medically vulnerable. Nursing homes can be very unpleasant places. And the problem is they often become simply warehouses of humanity. And that's a real tragedy. Not all of them are. I've seen some very good elder care centers, but the pressure is on, particularly under socialized medicine, to move things along and save money. And under the Liverpool pathway, the procedure is rather simple. Is you quit giving them food and water, but you keep them doped up so that they don't complain. And guess what? If you don't get food and water, right now we get food and water, and Johnny, I know I will, and you will. If I'm thirsty, I'm going to get me some food and water. I'm getting it. But when you can't and you're dependent on others, and then when you're doped up so that your complaints or even your senses aren't quite entirely there, at a certain point, you're gone. So there have been stories, and I appreciate that there were some very good stories, by the way, in all the newspapers. It wasn't just the conservative rags or the progressive newspapers. All the papers did some exposés on this. I mean, there was one case of someone calling the cops. They called the police because they said, look, I'm in this, I can't get any water. They won't bring me a glass of water. So it's quite astounding. And we live in a time now, particularly, I won't go into because so much has already been said, whole issue of COVID and the kind of treatments or non-treatments that have come up in that. I'm actually going to skip that because that's going to wear people out talking about COVID. I'm talking about the deeper issue of how you treat another human being, and particularly the people who are supposed to care for and treat vulnerable human beings, no longer doing so, but instead disposing of them.
Interesting.
Well, I hope
And
so. Hey, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you're listening and you're interested, or even if you're skeptical, go to Amazon.uk and you can get my book. It's called Evil Twins, Roe and Doe, How the Supreme Court Unleashed Medical Killing. And my name is Brian Johnston with a T, Johnston. And what I recommend, but my publisher doesn't like this, get the Kindle version. Because in the Kindle version, I demanded they do this. They have clickable links in the book to the footnotes. So you check my homework. When I say this is what happened or this is that story, you click and you read the original story. Because unless you wake up to the change in our culture, and it was a sea change. I got to tell you, when I was growing up, abortion was not legal. That's true. And I guess I'm an older dog now. I was born in '55, but I graduated from high school the year that abortion was legalized. But more to the point, not only could you not, before that day, you could not do an abortion if you were a doctor, unless the woman's life was in danger. If it was a serious issue, then abortions were done legally and appropriately, I will say. If a woman's life is in danger, and this is really a serious thing. So that was legal. But just doing an abortion for social reasons or comfort, or by comfort, I mean, I just don't want to, I want to be unpregnant, using abortion as a form of birth control. So not only did that change the laws, you couldn't kill a child in the womb, but to be honest, before that, you couldn't kill anybody if you're a doctor. You were prohibited both by the laws, but also by the ethics of your profession. And so that was 73. So we're looking at a huge sea change in our culture, and we become calloused to it. We're not looking at it in depth. And so again, the book is called Evil Twins, Roe and Doe, How the Supreme Court Unleashed Medical Killing. And it's available on Amazon at amazon.uk. So, click on that. And by the way, the Kindle version is always cheaper. So there's a touch of Scott blood in me. So I want you to get the best deal you can. But you need to understand that this is a real issue. This isn't just some far away issue. This is coming at us really hard. And if you care about being alive and you love your loved ones, it's something you should at least know about.
yeah, I agree. So what initially inspired you to write that book?
Well, I'll tell you, my family, I'm first generation Irish. My folks came over to the States after World War II. They came in '48, and they had 4 kids in diapers. And then I was born here, so I'm the Yank. And so I've grown up here, but I go back a lot, and I have a lot of friends and family in the UK. So I go to the UK a lot too. I mean, there's more Irish in the UK than there are in Ireland. Come on. So, but the fact is that I got a call when towards the end of when I just started college, I got a call from Ireland, and I had a grandaunt that lived in Sacramento, and I lived said, well, your grandaunt's in a nursing home at Sacramento. Would you mind checking on her? So, hey, this is family. So I did. And so I got used to that process of checking on family and visiting her. And there's certain things I saw then, and this is years ago, but I realized something just going to the nursing homes. And I don't know, Jamie, if you've been to nursing homes or what, the term of art there in the UK is elder care homes. But they don't often get a lot of visitors. And part of the reason is they're not fun places to go. So, yeah, I wish it was funny, but they're not fun places to go. And so when you go, you got to go ready to bring fun. You got to go ready to, you got to bring life to them because they're literally shut-ins. But worse, usually don't get out and about. They're not getting around. And sadly, our culture has inverted our view of the elderly, where the attitude is, well, they've had their time, they're done their thing. Let's shunt them off. And then a lot of families in America, I'll indict my fellow Americans. Well, if they got extra money or extra time, they're not going to spend it there. They got to pay for the boat. They've got vacation time to do. There's golfing to be done. There's fun in the sun. And so culturally, we tend to forget about our own family members they should be the most honored. They have the most experience, the most insight. And of course, my aunt told me many stories. She grew up in Ireland, but then married an American and came to the U.S. in the 30s and told me many stories of their life in the 30s in the U.S. and had an amazing life. They traveled on the R100, which I'd never heard about. And then I saw the picture. It was an airship. And, it was like going back in time to get to know their life. But you can learn a lot by visiting the elderly. That's how I got started. And then I used to teach, and I went into advocacy for the seniors after that. So I've been doing that for a year. I have legal training, and so as a legal advocate for seniors, I ended up as a commissioner on aging for the state of California and on the state's board of examiners of nursing homes.
Interesting. And do you travel often?
I do. In fact, I do travel often. So when I'm next in the UK, let's get together for a pint or a cup of tea. But the fact is that I'm concerned for our whole culture losing its moorings, and there's a need to really savor those that have gone before us rather than to shunt them out of our lives.
Yeah, I agree. And have you ever thought about writing any more books on this or any other topics?
I could write 1,000 of them. So yeah, quite a few. In fact, I have to restrain myself literally. I was telling my wife that I've got to get this one out. This is my second book. My other one was actually written specifically because of the impact of a certain Jack Kevorkian. Are you familiar with him?
Not really.
Yeah, he's an American doctor, but he wasn't a typical doctor. He was a necrologist. He didn't deal with living patients, but he became the champion of assisted suicide. And the problem with this is very simple. If you look at assisted suicide, it's almost entirely predicated on emotions. And a very simple conclusion that people extrapolate when they have their own emotions, and that is, I would never want to live like that. Or why would anybody want to go through that? And I've seen this at nursing homes very often. It isn't immediate family members. It's someone who hasn't seen Uncle Joe for a long time, and they come into the room and they look and they go, "Oh my God, Uncle Joe, look at it. He's a living cadaver." Well, I remember we'd go camping and fishing, and he'd dandle us on his knees. He had the greatest jokes. Oh, Uncle Joe, it was so. Look at him, doctor. Is there anything you can do, doctor? You've got to end his suffering. Joe hasn't asked for anything. Joe's not suffering. It's them and their own emotions that they cannot handle. Not only, here's the real issue that I see, not just mortality as a concept and the fact that those who are older are going to die. By the way, everybody, we're going to die. Just a little reminder.
Yep, we're all going to die at some point.
We're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when it gets personal. People it's one thing when it's reified and distanced as a concept. When it starts getting personal, and then usually it's not with ourselves, but family members, we start realizing, whoa, this death thing it kills persons that I know. And I'm one of them. I'm going to die. That fear and that emotional panic is often what propels this desire to get it over with. Sadly, and there's been a lot of writing on this, I recommend a Swiss psychiatrist who's written extensively on death and dying. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a book on death and dying. And she points out the famous 5 stages. Have you heard about the 5 stages?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think I'll mention. They're called the 5 stages of grief. They're actually used by a lot of stand-up comics now. It's denial. So you get in a situation that seems you can't deal with it. So you go into denial, and then anger, and then bargaining, and then deep depression. Deep depression. And then the 5th stage is finally acceptance. So these 5 stages of grief are very, very important. She coined them, but they're used in many professions now. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. She is the expert on death and dying. She has herself passed away, but she's recognized as one of the leading psychological, and again, as a psychiatrist, she wrote it specifically for her fellow psychologists and psychiatrists, because the goal of a psychologist, somebody's, works in psych, they have one goal, and that's to help you change. That's why you go to counselors. There's an old joke. I mean, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh
You know,
no, no, I don't.
well, just one, but the light bulb has to want to change. So the problem with psychiatry and counseling is you can counsel people all you want, but if they don't listen and they don't want to change, you got a hard time. Kubler-Ross wrote this book because when people face their own death coming and it's inescapable, they are going through emotional trauma and they want to deal with this. She outlines how to counsel people. And the book is very powerful. Again, her book, it was written in 1969, but it's more than a bestseller. It's available anywhere and on Amazon.uk. But she guides people how to counsel and to get people through these 5 stages of denial, how to get them to reconciliation. Because if you stop at denial, anger, bargaining, or especially the deep depression, the last one, you say, just get this, kill me. Jay, I can't handle this. I don't want to die. I want to go out my own terms. Jay, kill me, kill me. You've just robbed them of some of the best opportunity, because it's when you finally come to acceptance and you wake up to what you and I just said. Hey, we're all going to die. We've known this all our life. We're all going to die. And when you come to the point of acceptance, many people have great emotional healings. And her book is full of the stories of the emotional healings of people reconciling with their family members, the brother they hadn't spoken to for 40 years, with other family members. And that's what they want to reconcile, relationships. And sometimes that's often, as you know, attitude has a lot to do with life. It's actually having the right attitude. Many people go into remission because attitude impacts our health. So that's a very powerful book. That's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying. But right now, I'm talking about my book. My book is about how doctors now have started killing people. And the book is called, if you're just joining us, the book is called Evil Twins, Roe and Doe, How the Supreme Court Unleashed Medical Killing. And from the title, you can tell it's kind of based on how this happened in America, but it's happened in the UK too. Recently, the House of Lords just debated legalizing euthanasia. And I recommend you go back. I think it was a week and a half ago. So go back and look at that debate. And some of those quotes were very, very powerful, particularly from those who are working, as I have. If you work with the disabled community, you already know that culturally they feel rather vulnerable. If you're disabled, you feel like, well, maybe I should just not be a burden anymore. So I do have to applaud. The vote was close, by the way. So don't rest easy if you're there. If you're going to the NHS soon, have a real good relationship with your doctor, because there's great risk. And the whole issue of the Liverpool protocol. Again, I haven't been over there for a while, but it hasn't been fully resolved. So we're utterly dependent on the medical profession, particularly when we're most vulnerable. You've got to be aware of that. And it's only having the ethical and legal standards that will protect the vulnerable. That's the only way we can protect people, because I can't. Now, I was able to go and spend time and check on my grandaunt and get to know the nurses. But a lot of people don't spend that kind of time. And a lot of the people who are running those facilities, if no one's checking on the family, if that person is just a stranger using up a bed, there's a lot of pressure to free that bed. I hate to be talking in such a utilitarian manner, but we need to face reality. There's a lot of pressure. So without medical guidelines and ethics to protect the vulnerable, we're all in trouble. It's a very, very important issue, and that we've got to follow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that is all we have for this episode. It was great having here Brian talking about your book, and yeah, that was a very interesting conversation we had today. It was great.
Well, a real honor, John. I mean, again, I don't know how you do your stuff there. I do have a couple of cousins in London proper that I visit, and I literally was talking. He married a woman from the Philippines. Actually, they just got back to the Philippines, and he's been badgering me to get over. So I usually stay in the down there, but I have friends and family in the Midlands too. So
Oh, nice, nice. And until next time, stay tuned for more.